Well, hello there, Apple Bites. This is your Apple Bite, Rafael Tavares, talking to you straight from our show here, The Written Writ, a show where you and I and you take a journey together to become better writers. Yes, we are back. We are here. We're getting ready for New York City Comic Con. And we're going to bring you all the exciting news from the floor of the New York City Comic Con and let you know what's going on. Of course, I'll be there setting up the trailers and share them with you and talking to our pals and seeing all what's new. And of course, today it wouldn't be the show if I didn't have the Shadow. Hey, Shadow Rabbit, how are you doing?
Well, now that I'm hearing your beautiful voice, I'm doing okay, brother.
Are you ready for New York City Comic Con?
Hell yeah. No, not at all. But I've never been so conflicted about something I'm so excited about.
You're
But
telling me, like we were talking about in the green room, it's an interesting experience to know I want to go, I want to cover this, I want to see what's going on, and at the same time be like, I don't know.
hey, man, Geronimo, let's see what happens.
And that's what we do. It's what we do. It's what we're supposed to be doing. So it's kind of hard not to do.
That's what we love to do, man. And I can't even lie, man. I'm so excited to see all of our people. I was worried like a lot of people weren't going to be there. We were talking about it, but it looks like all our friends are going to be there. So hopefully it's a party.
Amazing. Like I don't know if you guys have been checking out my Facebook page, but people are signing up, going, "Hey, I'm at table this, I'm at table that in the artist alley." And it looks like it's the majority of the people we know who are going to be there, and I find that really interesting. You even told me that some space people were going to be there, maybe.
The Space Bastards are gonna be there. Yeah,
Ooh.
Eric is he's got a table in Artist Alley. I think it's A21. And I believe they'll have some New York Comic Con exclusives there too. So
Ooh, this is getting
table
interesting.
A21.
And I know that Phil surprised the heck out of all of us by being like, "Yes, I have a table there at
Yeah, dude,
New
that's
York City
awesome.
Comic Con, and we will be there." Legendary, what is it? Legendary Illustrations.
Yes, sir. I think.
There you go.
Did he just post that? Let me see if I can find that.
Yeah, he just posted it up recently. I think it was today because it was a complete surprise to me. I was like, "Whoa!" Because I had just finished talking to him because I'm working on the new trailer for the second Kickstarter. And he
Yeah,
was like,
they've
I
got
don't
it
know,
all
man. I
configured.
wanted to do a table, but I wasn't sure if I was going to do it. And all of a sudden, he's doing it. So I'm like, okay.
Yeah, man, he snagged that up. That's great, man. I'm half tempted to write a real late email saying like, I'm local in case anyone doesn't show up tomorrow.
Angel says he will not be there.
I know, man. You will be there. You'll be right here,
We will take
like
you with us,
always.
Angel. We will take you with us. we can't. We
But
can't
his work
have
will be there at
Shadow in the
Foos.
Ralph without some son of a.
Yeah. Oh man, son of a not gonna be there. But he's got his work at Foo Stamps table. He did this. He did a sick cover for them. So
Oh yeah, that's true. That's right. Yeah, that's
what's
right. He
that
just
issue number
posted it
2?
up. Yeah, he has that special cover there from. Yeah, it should be interesting.
Yes, I gotta pop over there, man.
Yeah, I
I
gotta go
really
over there
love
and go,
that.
hey guys, we were sent by the son of a.
I will, man. I really like Foo Stamps. Like their whole feel and everything is very much to my core of just
Yeah, Angel saying that he's
real
done the
live
cover for
ninjas.
issue 2.
Yeah, they're lucky to have you on it, man. Definitely gonna swing by there.
Look, he's even got the information. Booth 1679. That was a
Oh,
great year.
look at
Oh wait,
that.
I'm not
Someone.
supposed to say that.
It's okay. Just keep the blanket over that aging portrait of you behind you there.
Nobody sees any portrait back here. I have nothing covered.
I'd really love to make one of those. Just a Dorian.
I'm surprised you haven't done something like that. I think that'd be really creative for you.
I started to. I did one for Colbert back when he was doing his show.
Ooh.
Like he did a cover contest, and it was kind of like I think it was, I don't know. I made like 1,000 little tiny sculptures of him, like one of those Chuck Close kind of things. You walk away, it looks like go close, it's like much I'm sure he got a million submissions, so I never saw it on there. But
That sounds incredibly creative, as usual. Dude, man, I saw your spawn, and you figured out how to make the eyes glow.
well, because man, so that one's for my man Rally B.
I figured it was somebody. I was like, oh, this has to be for somebody.
You see what that freaking guy's bringing? So he made me a Deadpool. I'm looking at him like, oh man, I put some effort into this. So I want to make him a spawn. I'm pretty excited with it, man. So I started pouring molds recently. So I made like a little bobblehead green thing, stuck the lights in it. I'm pretty excited where this could go.
I'm impressed, bro. I was wondering how you were gonna make the eyes glow, and you didn't disappoint.
Oh, thank you, man. Try not to fuck around.
So let's get more spooky here, and let's bring in our guest. Howdy, how are you doing? Why don't you let the people know who you are, what you do, and all the goody good shoe stuff?
I will. Hi, I am Leanna Reena Hieber, and I am an author of 14 Gothic gas lamp fantasy novels. And the term gas lamp fantasy basically means Victorian set fantasy work. So it has mystery elements, has lots of ghosts, definitely has some horror elements. Sometimes there's some romance elements too, and as well as depends on the age range. I write for adults and for teens. So everything in my lineup is about PG-13 in content because I have 9-year-olds to 90-year-olds that read my work, and I can't offend my grandmothers, so I keep everything in that PG-13 range. But I love writing about spooky stuff and ghosts. I'm also an actress. I am also a New York City ghost tour guide, and I'm working on my first nonfiction book about ghosts around this country, which is really exciting thing to do, and I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
You are the perfect guest to kick off our spooktacular October special, because we have a lot of spooky friends and we want to share them and show them off.
Much appreciated. This is I as a goth, I am in the every day is Halloween camp, as the beloved song says, but especially every day is like doubly Halloween in October. So
Oh, definitely. October is just special. Even though we do tend to have the spookiness all year round, I feel like October it has this feeling to it.
Yeah. Always.
Yeah. And it's funny because I recently saw one of those things. It was a meme, and it goes, me before October and me after October. And I sat there and I go, I don't think there's much of a difference.
No, this is me all the time. This is my house. This is, it's like, yeah, it's, I don't change my name on Twitter to be like a spooky handle. Cause I'm like, no, I am goth 365. So welcome everyone else to our world for this month. Yes.
That's right. Our line of N95 Jason masks ought to be coming out soon. And I think that's very time appropriate.
Amazing.
No Shadow Rabbit, he'd do it.
I did actually have to look up black N95 masks. I did, and because I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not wearing something white on my face. I'm just not.
Yeah, anytime I gotta wear one of the white or blue ones, I'm like,
I know. Only if I have to, but no, they do exist. Black N95s do exist out there. I have them.
We've seen them.
And what I've got is I've got the. Are you reading? Something's Killing the Children by any chance?
Oh no, but I've heard really good things about it.
Well, the protagonist wears something of an Oni mask on a bandana, so I've got that and I just wrap it over my mask.
Nice.
It looks cool, and now I can wear it and I'm a good citizen. I'm just walking around with my
dude, man. You gotta show her the gas mask.
Oh, I've got it. I've got it downstairs. Should I bring that to Comic-Con, or is that going to get me like?
I don't know, man. It's a mask
walking through the door.
It helps you breathe. So I think you should bring.
I think everything's fair game at this point. I think a mask is a mask, and that's got a respirator, so you're exactly. All good.
You should see this thing. It's fantastic. It gives Shadow Rabbit a really spooky Shadow Rabbit feel.
No, it seems on brand. Go for it.
Well, thank you so much.
You know, it's so iconic that our friends are putting him in comic books now.
You've arrived.
Thank you.
You've arrived. That is congratulations. That's pretty awesome.
I appreciate it. But we are here to talk about you. So
Okay.
you read off just a list of awesome accomplishments and accolades, and I'm super interested to hear about whichever ones you would be so kind to tell us about tonight.
Well, the thing you see behind me was my debut novel. So, Strange and Beautiful. Basically, I describe it as Victorian Ghostbusters with Greek mythology bleeding
So,
literally onto the
Ooh.
streets of London at 1888 at the time of Jack the Ripper. And I posit a supernatural explanation for Jack the Ripper in that particular series. And I carry the family saga through to the First World War. So that was my first series. I started my road to publication was long and winding, as everyone's is. I started my professional career as an actor. I went to theater school, got my BFA in theater performance with a minor in the Victorian era, because the 19th century has always been something I've been quite truly fascinated by, in a way that I can really only posit to sort of a past life connection. Like, you know how some eras just sort of call to people, and that for me was a call for me, not because it was a great place or time to live if you were anybody but a rich white guy.
That's
But
true.
but at the same time, as we were talking before in the green room, the late 19th century, you start to see where our new world began turning towards the better. You start to see civil rights, you start to see suffrage, and then universal suffrage. You start to see workers' rights. You start to see a lot of the things that we take for granted today starting to really take shape and form in that 19th century. So in that sort of crux of this restrictive society, but people are pushing towards a better day, I really like writing in that time period. So, but I like to do it in fantastical ways, because you can make allegories. You can say a lot more about what's happening in the world around you sometimes by placing it in a fantastical way. Science fiction writers have been predicting our future for a very long time and writing kind of, pretty beautiful, esoteric, sometimes almost spiritual messages about it. I like playing in the genre fields yes, they're really fun. I get to sort of traipse around in spooky areas and have a lot of fun with that, but also have to have an underlying message of hope. And my books are very much about the Scooby Gang getting together, these different people from different backgrounds, different walks of life, diverse casts of characters who come together to save the day. And I really love a good found family narrative, and that goes through everything I do, whether it's from my first series to my most recent series, which is, you'll see here, the Spectral City series. Basically a psychic detective series. It's a girl gang of psychics with their favorite friendly ghosts who help solve crime and weird goings on in Manhattan in 1899. And I have, the cast of characters is all coming from different backgrounds, and that those different aspects and the way in which they bring their knowledge to the table, each one of them has a special part to play. And that really, I think maybe my background as an actor is really a part of getting that cast dynamic together. I love that chemistry of a good cast, an ensemble cast. I love seeing that in film, and I love writing about that too. So it's definitely, I've managed to stay published with at least a book or two a year since 2009, when my first book came out. And so I've been blessed to stay in the business. Some ups and downs. My first publisher went bankrupt, and that was tough. Because I just started, and then I was out of print. So I think anybody who's been in the business for any amount of years has had their editors quit on them, or has had a company fold on them, or any number of things, twists and turns. Like with any artistic field, it's tough going, but I really wouldn't. I don't want to do anything else. So, and I try to keep a bunch of plates spinning so that I always have some project going, which I know I'm in good company here.
Wow.
Super impressive.
That is impressive, man. That's a huge story of where you've come and where you've gone. And I have a little angel here. I'm trying to get into my scene.
Oh, hello. Hello.
Of course, she wants to share her Animal Crossing.
Well, of course. Who doesn't?
Now, have they made an Animal Crossing mod for the Victorian era?
That would be amazing. I would love.
I can see the animals are like that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, that's very fun.
Ooh.
All right, go ahead.
Oh,
Thank you for sharing that.
we have witness.
What are they up to tonight?
Yeah, the last time she had the Sims getting married to each other. Now she has the Animal Crossing guys.
Hey, look,
I see.
this is Peach
Nice.
popped out the tulip.
Nice.
Yep, she's my gamer girl.
All right.
She's awesome.
Hey, that's great. It's always wonderful to be able to share things with family like that.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm a proud gamer father, so I'm happy she's following in the footsteps.
That's awesome.
She's playing her own games, but that's the way it is.
Hey, something for
Not that
everybody.
not that I'm gonna say I hate Animal Crossing because I like it. So
It's adorable and
Yeah.
fun. I mean, I'm still playing Pokemon, so
I'm still playing Pokemon.
I mean, I love it.
Yeah.
I do. I can't say no to cute creatures. It's like my favorite thing.
Oh, it's great, man.
It's nice to mix the macabre
Of course.
with
It comes
uber
with cute
chibi
creatures.
cute things.
Absolutely. I'm definitely like a Muppet kind of goth. Like,
Nice.
when they announced that they're doing the Muppet Haunted Mansion, I'm like literally that is my identity. Like I am sort of a goth Muppet. It's like that's kind of my whole deal. I am the Halloween Town kind of goth where everything is, bouncy and excited. I'm one of those perky goths that annoyed the other goths at the club because I was always bouncing around. It's me.
Oh, so you're one of the ones that go, you're not really goth, but you act more goth than the goths.
I was gonna say, I was like, they can try me with that. But, no, I will out goth them to the end. I don't frankly care. It's like this has been me my whole life, and I don't really feel like I have to prove anything about that. So, yeah.
I completely feel you because
Goth served.
I dip in and out of my darkness, and then people go, oh, but you can't be completely goth because you're not always there. I'm like, you don't have to always be there. Your heart's goth. It's just the way it is. Just because I'm not wearing something today doesn't mean anything.
Exactly. It's not like it is not a full life experience if everything is just one note. I mean, yes, I'm always in black, but it's different. At least it's different textures
Exactly.
of black. 50
Yeah, because you have this light that comes from you, and right away I know some of the goths will be like, no.
Oh yeah, no, they'll totally do this to me, and all that, and I'm like, okay, have fun.
Yeah, just carrying off a little darkness on your back.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you just can't pay attention to the haters like that.
Vincent Vlado's goth till death.
Yes, he is.
And of course he has his own little thing there.
We are in good company. We are in good company. All right, my friends.
I like what we were talking about in the green room, where you like more of the fantasy aspect of the of that Victorian period, but it also has that sci-fi aspect to it, which is where steampunk comes from. And it's funny because I didn't think about it till that moment where I said, Dracula and Frankenstein, and I'm like, wait, that's true. It is. It's the same place, but it's two different aspects of the same place.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think they do really work well together. I think, as we were talking earlier backstage, because the 19th century is really the birth of so much of our modern technology, it's really fun to play in that sandbox because for a lot of people, the idea of a wireless, whether it's radio or any of the things that Tesla was talking about in terms of basically wireless communication, and the things that, sending a telegram, a telephone itself, not to mention harnessing the heavens and creating electricity. All of this stuff was very magical to people if you didn't know all the science behind it. So I really love playing both the fantastical element and the scientific element together, as they're kind of sides of the same coin. Magic might just be science that we haven't figured out yet. So I'm very much in that open nebulous place because the pseudosciences were big in the 19th century. Folks were trying to conduct experiments to contact the spirit world and measure ectoplasm literally and things like that. So there's these the wild pseudosciences that are quite truly between science and complete fantasy, and that's really kind of where my books kind of sit, in that what if place, almost a secret history, where I am pulling on real history, but I'm also taking the cue from the obsessions of the time period, because man, did that time period love to talk about ghosts and conduct seances
Oh,
and try to
definitely.
figure out, stuff between here and the beyond, and try to figure out that great mortal question, the divine mystery that was on everybody's mind. And still, that's the thing too, it's so relatable because it's still on everybody's mind. And so I
Exactly.
love playing with those aspects.
And you're right. There's this cross when it comes to the supernatural of technology trying to prove the supernatural. And if you watch the shows, the ghost hunting shows today, they have all that aspect of, well, look, we have this electronic thing where we're going to use it so we can prove that the ghosts are there.
Absolutely. So I really think that there's a lot. For me, I've tried to introduce some elements of science fiction into my work, but it doesn't, anyone who's looking for hard science fiction is not going to find that in my work. So I tried to sort of touch down in things because I don't want to talk about the late 19th century and not talk about the new Edison plant, which was on Pearl Street, because that would have been very much on everyone's mind in that time period. So you definitely have to acknowledge the time period that you're writing in, and then use as much of it or as little of it as you want. But you just have to stay very true to your world building. So, I try to set certain limitations with my paranormal world so that my ghostly characters, for example, aren't completely omniscient, that I have
Right.
limitations on them, because
Mhm.
otherwise, my ghosts are very handy. They're really great about being able to go places that my other characters can't, my living characters can't. But I have to be very careful not to make them almost too powerful. So that's, so in some ways I've utilized technology against the ghosts where the ghosts are having trouble with it. And so that's been where technology can become a conflict, which is definitely something we can also all relate to when technology becomes a conflict.
Makes complete sense, because if the ghosts are using the technology to be able to do some of the things they do, that means the technology can probably disrupt them as well. So
That's actually the premise of the whole crux of the Spectral Cities series, is exactly that there's in that trilogy of novels, there's a 3-tiered mystery, and one of each of those 3 tiers gets solved in the first, second, and third book. And in the third book, the villain is trying to not only eradicate Eve's department of psychic detectives, but also kill for a second time all of the ghosts that work for her, because he has a vendetta against ghosts. He just had a bad experience with ghosts and he wants to rid the planet of all of them. And he uses electricity to do that. One of the things that we know about ghosts, they can most often flicker a light bulb. It's one of the most common methods of ghost
yeah.
communication is the
Mhm.
lights flickering. So if I use the technology and use that electricity in reverse as a weapon against the ghosts to actually snap them out of existence, I had to ask myself the question, well, how am I going to make something threatening to my ghost characters? They're already dead. What can I threaten them with? Oh, well, ripping them entirely away without a chance to say goodbye, and not being able to haunt the people they love, who they pledged to stay on Earth to serve, almost like a guardian angel capacity.
Right.
Yeah, that makes up for a scary conflict for my ghosts in that book. And so it's been fun to sort of see what types of things I can turn around, that is, yes, a sign of progress, but also could be used for ill-begotten purposes too.
I like that.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I like that concept, and I like how you are balancing things out, because I know as some writers like to either give their characters way too much power, or it's yeah.
You got to have limitations. You have to have limitations on. I mean, you just have to. In any time that you have a character who has access to more than normal amounts of information, anyone writing a superpowered character, a mutant character, any of those, you really have to be specific about the things that they can and they can't do, because yeah, if it's a superpowered character, then creating the conflict that character comes up against, because all stories are about conflict, and if you don't have enough conflict, then you actually don't have enough of a story. And that's been definitely, I've had to work that out for myself throughout all of the every single book that I write. I have to make sure that I'm creating enough conflict throughout the character arc in the right places to make sure that I'm not making it too easy on my characters, because I really love them, and I sometimes find myself needing to be more cruel to them, because I don't necessarily go set in wanting to be really mean to them, but you kind of have to be mean to them.
What's the
That's the
worst
way
thing
it
you've
works. You
done
know,
to
the
one of
story is not going to go anywhere if you don't let
No, it's
anything
not.
happen. Yeah.
It's really not. It's really not. Yeah, I've definitely had to apologize to a lot of my characters.
Do you come in with a silver bullet in mind for any of your characters, or do you let the story
good
kind of
question.
work itself?
Give me a second, guys. We'll be right back. You guys can talk amongst yourselves.
Yes, absolutely. That's a great question. Usually I'll figure it out as I go along. I'll have a couple of roadblocks for sure that I know are my character's weak points, and then I'll kind of see as it develops and as the stakes get more and more dire, what's the next level of that? Okay, what's the next level beyond that? And depending on how long the story is, if I'm writing a novella, I have to make sure my world building is short and tight and taut, and I might not have a chance to go into the higher tiers of conflict. I might just be able to solve one problem or two problems of the course of a novella. Short story, basically, you're just kind of a slice of life moment, dipping down into this one particular moment and resolving that. Or in the case of horror, not resolving that. But for novel lengths, novel length fiction, you definitely have to keep amping that up. I'll go back to Spectral City just because it's my latest novels. Eve Whitby is my heroine, and she is a very gifted psychic, and she can communicate with spirits better than anyone, can establish a channel and have full length conversations, not limited just to messages. She's very, very adept at that. But there's a cost to her powers in that if she overtaxes herself for too long, she has blackout migraines, which is also something that people who do have psychic sensitivities do talk about. So that's also something that for people who do believe in psychic phenomena, that's actually kind of coined to that ability. And as someone who has dealt with migraines through my life, I wrote from personal experience, and they really can be absolutely debilitating. So, trying to talk about, okay, well, here we're in a chronic pain scenario, and how can I write about that in a way that doesn't make the character feel helpless, but also is realistic to her limitations.
Although that's a nice, cathartic release of something that's pretty personal. I mean,
Yeah, totally. Totally. No, I had some reviewers ask me, they're like, "Do you have migraines? Because this is really real." And I was like, "Yes, friends, welcome." And folks were pleased with how many different types of chronic pain representation I had in my book, because it wasn't the only one. There was several different ways that some of these awesome gifts have their other side to it, without it being something that I didn't want anyone to feel like it's a narrative where everyone is miserable, because that's not, I mean, like I said, I'm a perky goth, so you can be miserable, but you have to have fun with it.
there you go. Well, it's a genre piece, but it's a genre you want to be in.
Exactly. So yeah, and so escalating that over the course of the book for Eve was, okay, well, so she's super psychic and really gifted in this capacity. What if the villain is as well, and can get into her mind and sort of shut her down? And so that really kind of became uh, a through line growing as the series went on, and so the smaller threats really led into this greater showdown between these two psychically gifted characters. So it will surprise none of you that I'm a big X-Men fan with Professor X and Jean Grey and all of the above. So definitely, my growing up, I was obsessed with Star Trek and Deanna Troi, my favorite character, even though she wasn't terribly well written. But I just loved that there was a psychic on board the Enterprise. I just thought that was great. So I've really always been drawn to psychic stories, and so that's another thing that's a through line through all of my books, is that all of my books have psychic characters as well as ghosts. So those two things are always kind of coined in my world.
Are all of your books in the same universe, or do you?
They are. They actually are. I didn't intend for that to be the case, but the Heberverse is real, and I have been allowed to do so because my publishers have never told me no. And so even though they're all with different publishers, I basically come in saying, "Hey, I'm going to borrow some of these folks from this other series, and I tell my editors, please stop me if I start getting self-indulgent, because I don't want to. I want each series to stand on its own. So you can start with any of my series, but just start with book 1. Because jumping in the middle of the series is not going to help you. But so start with book 1 of any of my series. And then if you go to the others, you'll be like, oh, so that is before this, or oh, that's after this. So I have a continuum that goes from 1867 to 1919 at the end of World War I. And so in there, a lot of stuff happens for my families, and I don't cover every single aspect of that. But I do hop around and try to, and I do refer to, supernatural wars that my characters have fought. They have been kind of, embattled for a long time, especially my matriarch, my psychic matriarch, who's been like everybody's badass grandma now for a while. So eventually she's going to age, and I'm just like trying to deal with the idea that someday she may have to pass on. But see, that's why I have ghosts, because then they just lose this corporeal stuff, and then there's still a character. So I kind of cheat in that regard. But yeah, everything
things
is
that
set in the
matter
same
never go away.
universe. Right, exactly. So
Sometimes
yeah.
they creep around in the dark.
They do. And that's the other thing too, is like I have a lot of friendly ghosts, but I also want to make sure that I don't lose the idea and the concept that ghosts still startle. Eve has a line in Spectral City that said ghosts are still creatures of startle and shock. And there are many times where I use them as a jump scare, because that's, even though they're friendly, and even though they're characters that are beloved of the cast, I still want it to be uncanny.
No, I think that's very cool. Do you have kind of like well, I mean the term, but a Bible of sorts of abilities for different creatures and psychics and ghosts, or is that sort
That's
of an evolving process?
that's a great question. I I am sort of a chaos
Like a
theory
monster
writer.
manual?
Like for my own work, I wish that I did, and I wish that I had begun that at the beginning of my career. I can't tell you how much I wish I had started like a series Bible with all of those little details. But no, as a haphazard, nonlinear, chaotic good kind of alignment, I have to go back and read my other stuff and be like, wait, what did I say that happened here? So
Nah, nothing wrong with
yes.
that
So
either.
eventually, someday, if any, hey, listening audience, if anybody wants to create the wiki for the Heberverse, please, by all means. Absolutely.
Well,
So
you
I
know,
mean, I do have like a fandom wiki that a couple of my readers did start. I don't know how populated it is yet, but I was very glad that at least somebody started it. And then we all collectively said we would go in there and plug a few things in when we had the time. And then I've had 3 book deadlines for different publishers, so I haven't had the chance to go back to that. But yes, I definitely recommend, if you are a writer, to have some kind of document that at least notes, things like hair and eye color and other details that you don't want. If somebody has a name and a nickname and it has a particular spelling, please put it down, because it might have changed in a book, and then you have to go back and have a reason for why that changed, because it wasn't supposed to be that way. So yeah, and I do have editors, and they're wonderful, but like sometimes editors aren't going to catch long-term series stuff. So I do actually recommend a series Bible for anyone else who is not me. Because spreadsheets make me itch.
yeah, they are. There's something that you have to force yourself to want to maintain, and even after you've learned how to do it, it's trying at times.
See,
But
I should, but I do not, and it is.
that's something my brother here will be able to better talk about writing processes and
Good.
appropriate.
Good. Yeah, no, I'm hopeless about those kinds of things, and I'm trying to. My editors and we've talked a lot about this. I have 3 different editors at different houses, and we're all talking about how to get a little collectively. We're all very pressed for time, so I've had to be much more of a plotter. So there's the adage of, are you a pantser or a plotter? So do you write by the seat of your pants, or do you plot it all out? And I'm definitely a pantser. Like, clearly I am a pantser, but I'm having to like become a little bit more of a plotter, because I don't have time to just wander my way through the narrative like a little fairy in a ring doing a dance
Kerouacian.
and everything. No, I don't have time for that. I actually have to know where I'm going. So the days of sitting back and just being able to explore where it goes, I don't have that luxury, and that's a blessing, and that's something that I signed up for when I said yes to 3 overlapping contracts. But I'm trying to get better about being a
Yeah.
plotter. It's a skill I think everyone should try to have, even if it doesn't come innately to you.
And not all who wander are lost, but I guess when you have
Right.
three
It's
different
true. It's
three
true.
different bosses partners to answer to, you should probably know
Yeah.
a little
At
bit your
least,
destination points.
yeah, at least know what state you're in.
At
Right.
least. It's funny. I was away here. John Ottinger popped up with this question, which is pretty decent here. What do you
Ooh,
think
yeah.
the difference is
John.
between a ghost and an angel?
Okay, this is such a good question. And my designation in that between a ghost and an angel, if it's a friendly ghost, that's a very fine line. I think when you get to angel, I do believe that ghosts might be able to eventually sort of rise to the status of guardian angel,
Mm,
but in my world, everything is energy based, and that energy is on a spectrum. So my demons in my books are not the named demons, and they're not from any one particular religion or any one particular sort of schema, but they are a negative energy that has chosen to remain negative and miserable and violent so long that it is no longer human. And then it becomes this silhouette, this lightless silhouette, a black hole, blacker than, like this literally absence of light silhouette that is my
Knox.
demonic world. And then from that goes the spectrum towards goodness and neutral, and then towards something that's positivity that might actually be able to have a supernatural level of either interference, or can stop something from happening, or might be able to have a physical force that a ghost would not be able to have.
right.
So my spectrum is one of sort of ghostly physics, where the more negative it goes towards the demon, the more positive it goes towards the angel. And a lot of my friendly ghosts are kind of in that, could progress towards that angelic status and be given and granted more and more um, kind of spiritual force. But for most of my ghosts, they're incorporeal, they're luminous, they can't pick something up. They can muster one poltergeist moment if they really think about it, and they got to be really mad or really passionate about it. And so I still want my ghosts to be limited by the fact that they cannot have a corporeal presence. So
Right.
I usually try to set the mystery is that there has to be something tactile that happens. So it can't necessarily be my ghosts, but my ghost can point towards that tactile and try to bring those things out. And then as my ghosts go, they may be able to graduate to that sort of angelic status, or they might find that they want to go on to the great beyond. I don't talk about heaven or hell. I do sort of talk about a between state. And
Mhm.
in my books, I have a couple different words for that between state. In my English London set works, that's the Whisper World, which is very much based on the idea of the underworld.
Right.
And in my United States stuff, I talk about the corridors between life and death. So there's definitely a middle ground space, but I'm very clear to not try to put any one religion into all of this, because I have people who do have faith backgrounds. The hero of the Spectral City, he's a Jewish gentleman.
Hmm.
And, I'm very interfaith about that, and I respect everyone's particular path. But I, as the narrator, and my world building is not of one particular schema. It's not of one particular faith based thing. So I'm aware that I come from sort of a Christian background in terms of like how I was raised, but I'm also involving a whole lot of witchcraft and a whole lot of pagan and just naturalism into my magical system as well. So there's a whole lot of things that I'm kind of talking about that a lot of people would ascribe to sort of a faith-based system, but I'm trying to stay very, very open about that. My characters do not talk about the great beyond. They don't know. The ghosts haven't gone there yet. And when they do, it's not something that they can talk about, because who can describe paradise? Whatever that may be for people. I also say that's very, very, very personal, because
Yeah.
I really do. It's going to be different for every
Every
person. I
person.
have
Yeah, I
a
agree.
sacred space that, depending on your belief system, what you see in that sacred space depends on your beliefs. So I really kind of think about that in general about spirituality. I want it to be super, super open. So, and because I just think that I want anyone from any background to be able to pick up my stuff and not feel alienated.
I completely agree. I feel like the whole thing about storytelling is not to like lead, but to like show, well, this is where things are. This is what's going on. It's a little more difficult to do that because we do have our own personal opinions. You can probably say something that goes in a certain way, but you have all this other stuff that's helping you not lead anybody in whatever direction you probably personally feel. I like the way you've set up your world. It's similar to the way I see life in general. You don't just have this, because even if you're a Christian, even when it comes to that, they go, well, this other stuff out here. It's just that we're paying attention to this, our own doctrine says it all the time. And if you look at the Ten Commandments, it's not I'm the only God. It's like, you won't have any other gods besides me. So I feel like there's this opening of, wait, that means there's other gods.
Exactly. And that's the thing. It's just like the world is full of amazing things.
Mm-hmm.
And I really, I lean in a lot to the concept of divine mystery, of like, my characters haven't figured it all out. My ghosts certainly have some idea of a different state of existence in their place, and they ponder that a lot. But at the same time, they're not trying to tell you what to, I don't like proselytizing of any kind in any way, shape, or form. Just sort of like the general message is like, don't be mean and terrible. Like, just don't be evil, like that's my whole deal. I mean, I really do kind of think that the Wiccan phrase of harm no other, do what you will is a pretty good phrase. It's basically the golden rule, which is pretty good advice.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where my, that's sort of where my messaging stops. Beyond that, it's,
but it's funny because
it's all fun and
if you look at it, every religion breaks it down to that golden rule.
All does.
They have all this other stuff, but it always comes back to be good to one another.
That is, that's, I mean, any faith that's worth its salt, that doesn't, then absolutely has that general rule. And, so I think that for me is just, I keep going back to that sort of, what are my general principles? Because you do have to write from your own heart and your own spirit. But also too, if I'm writing characters that are outside of my background, I will also hire sensitivity readers, because again, harm no other, do what you will. Harm no other is the first directive of that. And so by hiring sensitivity readers who are of a cultural background, of a racial background that I am not, or of an orientation, or I have a trans woman in my Spectral City series. And so I have a very good trans woman as a very dear friend of mine who I've worked with in many different capacities in theater. And so I hired Ashley. Hey, Ashley, can I hire you for your read on this? And let's talk about how we would, what's the best, most accurate, and least harmful way to actually talk about, a trans character in the 19th century, because the language is different. The language would be different, and she would have to hide things differently than in our modern world. But it's not that trans folks didn't exist. It's not that
they did.
People of all kinds have always existed. It's like it's like the folks who, go back and do a historical without any people of color. It's like, what are you doing? Like, London and New York has always been diverse from the beginning of time. So, so it's historically inaccurate if you have a homogenous society entirely. It's just, that's not, and that would be boring. So the sensitivity readers for me are really, really critical. And I like to talk about that whenever I'm discussing these types of things. If you're writing outside of your experience, it's a great way to just have a dialogue with somebody to make sure that you're not inadvertently repeating something that ends up being, derogatory words that as language keeps evolving, we want to make sure we're trying to steer clear of that, because it takes people out of the narrative.
It does completely. It really pulls you out, especially if you know your history. Like you're saying, there's been people who dressing up there's been trans people all the time, and especially in history, we hear it all the time. And oh, so and so was doing this behind the scenes. He was dressing like a woman, it's so funny because they'll say it, as a historical thing, but I feel like, okay, I know what we're saying here is this person was dressing like a woman, and he was doing it out in the open in that time period, which was brave as heck.
Yeah. And so I have to be aware that there are different things, that some of my different characters are going to feel safe in some spaces and safe in not safe in other spaces. But that's no different than how things are today. There were Oscar Wilde, we were talking about the picture of Dorian Gray earlier. Oscar Wilde lived in a time when being gay was a crime, and we're not over, as a global society, we have not reconciled that globally yet. That's still on the books in a lot of places, and there's still folks fighting for rights of all kinds. So we're still fighting some of these battles, culturally. And so it's one of those things where I just try to make sure that I'm speaking to the time period, but not necessarily redoubling the harm of the time period.
Right.
People knew in the 19th century that if you said a slur, they knew it was a slur. So I don't really like people that justify slurs and things and be like, oh, that was just the time period. No, actually, don't excuse it. People knew that was a bad word then, and they knew it was offensive then. So, I in some ways, for me, I just get very leery of trying to insert harmful things just for quote unquote historical accuracy, whether that's violence against women or anything that's, that I feel like doesn't necessarily have you don't have to put those things in just to be historically accurate. I mean, people were like talking about Game of Thrones, for example. Like, I didn't like all the violence against women in Game of Thrones. And people were like, yeah, well, it's historically accurate. I'm like, yeah, it has dragons in it. So you don't have to be historically accurate about this stuff. I mean, sure, things have happened, but you don't necessarily just have to accept it as, oh, well, this is just the way things are or were or have been. I don't know. We're imaginative. We can imagine a better future. We can imagine a better past.
I understand if it has something to do with the main story, if it moves the story forward, or if the character needs that in that background, because that's what makes them who they are. Yeah.
Yep.
But I feel
there
like
are
sometimes,
some cases, but
I feel like sometimes, like you're saying, I feel like sometimes they throw it in there, just to throw it in. One, they throw it in there, historically accurate, and two, they throw it in there because they know the audience is going to be like, ooh.
Right. That's the thing. It's like, I'm not here for putting in something that's damaging for titillation value. I'm just not, like, that's frankly lazy storytelling. Just write a more compelling conflict, frankly.
I agree. I think, if you're adding in shock value things just to be shocking, then that's an excuse for not coming up with a good story. But also, I'm a little bit weary. Like, bad things happen in history, and I do wonder, do you ever worry about walking the line between forgetting the importance of those bad things?
No, because I do talk about them, because I make sure that I have discussions about them. I don't paint a rose-colored view of my 19th century at all, because I think I absolutely agree with you that I'm not interested in historical revisionism at all.
Right.
So I talk about racism, I talk about sexism, I talk about anti-Semitism, and I talk about anti-gay and anti-LGBTQ plus sentiment and laws and other things. I'm very pointed about that. I just don't necessarily put my characters through it unless there is a reason why it has to happen. And again, I don't really think stories about marginalized pain always have to be in play. I think there's plenty of that, but I'm personally not the person to write a Toni Morrison novel. It's like, that's not my place. So I feel, and also too, there are ways in which to handle things sensitively and really dig into our very troubled past and present. But at the same time, I do have to walk that line of, I don't necessarily I want to touch down on this aspect, but I don't want to go so far that I feel like it's just egregious. So it's, but you have to figure it out every single time. But sometimes my editors have tried to take out uncomfortable moments, and I'm like, no, I'm sorry. This tension here does have to be here because the time period, it would be inaccurate if the characters
If it
don't take
wasn't
a
there, yeah.
moment to look around and make
Mhm.
sure they're safe before they do something that would put them in danger were they in any other place.
No, I think that's interesting. I mean, how often do you find that you have to walk that line between not falling into some sort of, you know, trope for a group, or to, you know, in order to address, like you said, the trans woman that you have advising?
Yeah, I
I think
think
that's a real interesting.
yeah, we talk every time about how can we, you know, how can we make sure that we're honoring that she has a specific identity without making it about that identity too,
Right.
because also she's also just a
Obsessing
part of the
over it.
team.
Exactly.
You know, that's the
Right.
thing too. So it's one of those things where I don't want the reader to feel like her only identity is that she's a trans woman.
Right. That's her
She is
superpower.
Yeah.
right, you know, like, no, that doesn't help. That's othering in its
Right.
own way, you know. So in some ways it's like, yeah, she's also a really good cook and she's kind of the mom of the bunch, which is great. And you know, these are things that some of my other you know, female characters don't want anything to do with. So it ends up balancing out kind of really nicely, so that she has other things that, you know, are a part of why she wants to be a part of this team. And so you know, I think that that's really important, that especially when you're leaning into these things about painful things in the past and the present about identity, you have to make it more than just about that one thing. It's like people have to be fully realized. And so that really, for me, is the way I walk the line, is to make sure that all of my characters are as fully realized as I know how to do. And I'm still learning everything. Every time I write a book, I'm always still learning.
That makes complete sense, because you do have these projects out here where they're like, oh, this guy's gay. I'm like, okay, so what does it have to do with the story? I'm just telling you he's gay. I'm like, but what does that have to do with the story? I know he's gay. You know, why are you showing me this? I can understand that he's gay, but what does it have to do with the story? You know, if in the story we find out he's gay, then I'm like, okay, in the story we find out he's gay. But that feels more like he's a person who happens to be gay, who's in this story.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, and I think, you know, again, publishing has been doing a good job of trying to become more diverse in publishing more diverse voices, but you can't just sort of throw in diversity just for its sake and just not have done your homework about it either, because then that just seems like, then that becomes tokenism, and that doesn't help anybody
Right.
either.
That's
So.
the difference between, you know, making Sulu gay in the movie as opposed to someone who's more like, are you a fan of James Tinian?
Oh
By any
yeah,
chance? Yeah. So I mean,
yeah.
the way he handles, you know, LGBTQ as he's like, yeah, okay, and then oh yeah, his boyfriend's there. Anyway, so back to fighting vampires. It's like, what?
Absolutely.
It's like, yeah,
Absolutely.
it's
Dude,
just a thing.
man.
It's not a big deal.
If
I
you
think
have a
that's
simple
interesting.
scene where he comes home and they kiss when he comes through the door, you already said it. Oh, he's gay.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
oh,
now
okay.
the story's not about that. The story's about the fact that he's a cop and he's trying to solve this case. So it just happens to be what he is.
It's like, anyway, so let's go back after the reptilian people
Exactly.
under the airport, you know.
Well, and that representation is really important. You know, folks of color haven't seen themselves on screen or on book covers, you know, in historically as often as we're starting to get more and more representation in, you know, across cinema, across media. And that's fantastic, because people do want to see themselves in the things that they're consuming, because, you know, it's hard to feel left out. And again, not any one background should have a monopoly over the stories being told.
Yeah, definitely. Like for a while there, one of the heroes that I started working for to create into a comic book, I had him base his technology off of Tesla, you know, and you know he's a Spanish hero, but he just happens to be a Spanish hero, you know, a Latino hero, you know, it's just who he is. But
Yeah.
he's still doing what somebody would normally do, you know. It's just that, oh, he's so and so happens to be Spanish.
Yep. Yep,
But at the
absolutely.
same time, I'm covering technology like Tesla, which somebody will be like, well, how is that significant? Because why would this person know? I'm like, dude, not just because you're from another country doesn't mean you don't know these things. There's smart people everywhere. You can't look at it like, okay, oh, but they're not from over here. Shouldn't they be looking at somebody else, somebody more comparable? I'm like, no, because Tesla's a big name. Thomas Edison's a big name. It's not just it's not, they're not just American icons. They're historical icons.
Right.
And a lot of people look at both of them and go, I want to be like him.
Yeah, well, and that's and Tesla was not American; he was Czech. So
Exactly.
and that so he was of Slavic origin, and so that's and they had their own history and conflicts and everything, and a lot of that he was basically, in some ways, a lot of folks were coming at that point to the United States as refugees from conflicts and things from all around the world. So I feel also too, when you start talking about the sciences, there were folks working on these levels of science in every single country. It's like there were scientists in every single country, and everyone was coming at it a little differently. They didn't necessarily have the global symposiums. They couldn't hop on a Zoom call like we can now, but technology shared so much more rapidly now, but there's still gatekeepers of that now. And Thomas Edison was the original gatekeeper. He is a villain in my book, and Tesla is always the hero.
Villains in a lot of books,
and history.
I can understand why.
Yeah,
he's a bit arrogant.
He was an asshole.
Yeah.
And he stole everybody's patents. He stole everybody's patents, and he was unapologetic about it. And I just think that's I have a lot of animosity for Thomas Edison. So, and anyway, that's a whole nother argument for another day. But yes, but definitely the concept that anybody had a monopoly on intelligent progress is not looking at the reality of things. But I have had people review my books poorly, saying that I'm putting some sort of feminist agenda, or that there's too much diversity onto my books, and I'm like, that's because you don't want to see it. But it is historically inaccurate for my books to not have diverse casts. It is historically inaccurate. It's New York City, working class characters. It's going to be diverse and full of immigrants. Deal with it. So, and I just, you have to shake your head at that, and you can't engage with that kind of thing, because it's just people who don't want to see, who don't want to see anything but their narrow view of things. And everybody's got a right to their opinion, but I definitely feel like it's one of those things where I can say a lot about what's happening right now by looking back 100 some years, because we're fighting a lot of the same battles about rights and about and various freedoms. We are, and that's not again, that sounds very heavy and didactic and stuff. No, it's an action adventure. It just also happens to every now and then talk about people's rights. So thumbs up.
I completely understand where you're coming from. I tend to write a lot of strong female characters, and I get a lot of flack for it sometimes. And sometimes it's like, well, how do you know how to write a female character, or why would a female character be doing the stuff that you're saying that she's doing? And and I sit there and I go, well, dude, I've had mostly female best friends my whole life. Where do you think I'm pulling this from? Most writers pull stuff from their own backstory, which is why writers think backstories are so important, because your own backstory tends to make these characters that you're putting out there. I love the whole concept of don't anger a writer, because he's going to kill you many times.
Yep.
And that's what we do. We pull from our own life, and that's why, like, a lot of people go, write what you know, but they take it to an extreme. They're not saying that you write only what you know. You write the characters the way you know them. If you got a strong female character, you're pulling that from somebody this is how this person I knew was, and she's very strong and she's very heroic, and then they like to say, oh, but that you're just being too feminist. I'm like, no, that's how she was. How can I be doing something if the person that I'm basing the character on was the same way that the character
there's so many people that like to think that they know better about these things, and it baffles me every single time. And I feel like at the end of the day, hey, we are human, and that is a shared humanity that we all have. I don't, yes, I have strong female characters in my books. I also have, really strong male characters. I have really strong non-binary characters in my work. And it's just, I have strong people in my work, but also strength comes in many different
Exactly.
shapes and sizes
Mhm.
too. And that's a really important thing too. It's like I want my male characters to feel like they have every access to the emotional range that I give my female characters, and vice versa, because we are all human. Because I think it does everybody know it doesn't help anybody if we really limit what this person can or can't be because of a gendered identity or any of that kind of stuff. It's like, no, that just that's a constraint and a conflict that
Yeah.
doesn't help in storytelling. Yes, external conflicts, absolutely. If you're limiting that person to being only like this in that sort of restrictive,
Mhm.
that the roles as imposed by a strict regime, okay, well then that's not a complex, fully
No.
realized character.
There's a
And
caricature of a character.
right, exactly. And you can go through growth. My characters sometimes will start a little seem a
It was getting good.
She's coming back.
Come back.
little
Come back.
two-dimensional. Whoop.
Oh,
Where do we
hold
go?
on.
Okay, there you go. You're back.
Coming back.
Yes.
So she doesn't seem to be like she's a strong heroine, but she gets there.
Yeah.
And so I think that we also have to allow for character growth to happen too, and the fact that things aren't black or white and things aren't we have to give our characters room for growth, give them some flaws sometimes so that they can learn. But it's tough because all of these things, everybody's got an opinion. So
Oh,
no
definitely.
matter what you do and no matter how well you try to do it, somebody's going to have an opinion about it, and you just have to say your desire to see your work out in the world has to be stronger than your fear of what somebody's going to say about it.
It's funny that you say that because I've done the story where I write the same character because I forget who said it, but it always stuck in my head. You write strong characters. You don't write strong male characters. You don't write strong female characters. You write strong characters. So what I did was I took a story and I made the character male and then I made the character female, but it's the same story. And I gave it to people and they're like, "Oh my God!" They had nothing to say about the male character. Oh, it's perfect, it's fine. But they had so much to say about the female character, and I'm sitting there going, how can you separate these two if the characters are doing the same exact thing in both stories? I didn't change the story just because she was female. I left the story the same, and people were like, it was an interesting experiment. And just to see how people react to it.
That would have made me mad. As a woman, that would be cool, because I mean that's sexism at work.
Exactly.
The same thing happens with any marginalization. The same thing happened where people want to put everybody in a box about what they can and can't do. But
I think the worst
as
thing
storytellers, we have to go beyond that.
I was gonna say the worst thing somebody ever told me, and it still doesn't make any sense to me. Is like, oh, Ralf, you feel that way because you have a daughter. And I was sitting there going, wait, that doesn't make any sense. Because you're saying that everybody who has a daughter will feel like I do, but I know men who have daughters and they marginalize their daughters and they make their daughters be less than what they are. So that concept doesn't make any sense. And I've been writing female characters before I had a daughter.
That's the thing. It's like you shouldn't have to have something, and this goes back to what we were talking about back in the green room too, about I have had a hard time during our current climate because I would like to think the best of people, but it's been very hard when I see people who aren't thinking about others. And so it's like I don't know how to explain to someone that they should try to care about someone else, even if they're a stranger. Like I don't know how to get through to someone like that thinks that you have to have something personal involved in order to care about someone else. It's like I just would like for there not to be this widespread thing that is hurting people around the world right now. So I'm going to do what I can to mitigate those steps, for me. But I think, that's the idea that you have to have some kind of skin in the game in order to care about certain topics. I think that that's very that's reductive. It's not helpful because
It's not at all.
No,
Not at all, man. Yeah.
Yeah,
and again, it's
generally.
limiting people's imagination. It's like, okay, no, empathy, just try to think about it. Just try the concept of empathy. Let's try to roll with that here.
Rabbit, you would say?
From your lips to God's ears, but
Right? Right? I mean, that's all we can do, right?
yeah.
You know,
So
it doesn't
I
make
know
any.
I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but you know.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me. I write. My characters are strong characters. They just
Yes.
happen to be who they are. If they're
Exactly.
Spanish, they're Spanish. If they're women, they're women. If they're men, they're men. I can actually change them in and out to be anything because they're strong characters. And then one of the things that I get, and especially from like the writing community, is, well, you're not writing it right, because then your female character is not going to be the same as your male character. My female character may have female attributes, but she's still going to have those strong abilities, those strong feelings, those strong, just because she's female doesn't mean it makes her less of a person.
Well, and again, this people want to impose restrictions on people all the time about what they think that a person does and doesn't do. And I think that those people that either they're not well read, or they're not well traveled, or they keep their social circles very, very specific. And I don't know, that's boring to me. So
Yeah.
I try to follow a bunch of different voices from a bunch of different backgrounds on things like Twitter, on social media. I try to
Yeah.
follow a bunch of different people who are, especially writers who are working in the industry, because I want to see the types of things that folks of different cultural, different, backgrounds are saying. And because I want to have a more nuanced discussion about that, as we are in a global community, whether people like it or not.
Exactly. And that's the whole thing. You have all this stuff to pull from. And one of the things that I love that you were talking about is how much research you actually do. Because talking to like new writers and telling them how much research they have to do, they're like, no, you don't have to do that much research. I'm like, what are you writing that you don't have to do the research? If you are talking about Tesla, you better at least know something about Tesla. If you're talking about
people will defend him. Good.
Yeah. And it's funny to me because it's like, no, I don't need to know any of that stuff. I'm like, well, you need to know at least the basics. You need to do your research. You need to if you're let me do something simple. If your character knows how to shoot, there's a reason they know how to shoot. You better figure out how guns work. Why would you need to know all that, Ralph? I'm like,
because that's what you're writing about. You have to put words on the page, and the words are about the things that you're talking about. Again, I don't in those cases, people just really aren't aware of how story structure happens at all. You have to know a thing about a thing.
Exactly.
But it's really funny is that too, that you can do all the research you want and people will still tell you you're wrong. I had a I had a 1-star review on Amazon because, and they stopped reading the book because I used the word preventative, and they said that there was no such word, that the word was preventive, not preventative. And I had looked up this word in the Oxford English Dictionary to make sure that I had a word that was in fact correct. Spell check did not flag it as a non-word. And that word is in usage as, I basically used the slightly more archaic version of the word preventive, which a Victorian set person would use. And so 1-star review, they just said that this word doesn't exist. And, Teddy Roosevelt certainly wouldn't ever use it or whatever. And I was so baffled. And thankfully, like 4 different historians commented on that Amazon review. It's like, actually, it shows up in 1860 in the following medical journal. And so I was very thankful that people had my back on that, because, and at least the person didn't delete their review, but at least there's comments saying, actually, maybe you should do the research. And again, if I got something wrong, great, I will try to change it if it's within my power to change it. And people do get things wrong. I'm not saying I'm always perfect, but in these cases, sometimes folks will just focus in on something that they are sure is not correct. And so I have to watch it because there are certain things that are in fact historically accurate, but it sounds too modern. I just tweeted the other day because someone put up a list of phrases from the 1880s, and there was a phrase about sort of being morbid and feeling melancholy, and the phrase used in 1880 was "got the morbs." Got the morbs for like feeling melancholy. And I'm like, that's the best phrase ever. And I would get absolutely skewered for using that because it sounds way too modern. It sounds very cutesy. It sounds like, lol speak, but I love the phrase "got the morbs," which is totally historically accurate, that I can never use. I also don't use the word okay, even though okay is in the OED from about 1819. But the word sounds a little too casual. It sounds a little too modern. So I don't end up using it because it pulls me out of a narrative. It happened when I was watching the John Cusack film, The Raven. They said okay. And actually, that's what made me go look it up, because I was like, that doesn't sound right. But I went back and I was like, okay, screenwriters, you did your homework. That is absolutely in usage. I just don't like it. So, you sort of have to end up making those choices for yourself. I think there was a paper a while back called the Tiffany problem, because the name Tiffany is actually a medieval name, but it sounds so 1980s that folks don't believe it. So, and someone had like this medieval set thing and they named someone Tiffany and just got this backlash. So there was this, sort of paper about it. The Tiffany problem is in fact a medieval word. But so you do have to, even though if you've done your research, you still kind of have to have a sense for yourself of what is and what isn't going to fly for folks.
I completely agree. As writers, we use a lot of vocabulary, and I don't know if you do it, but I have dictionary.com to give me the word of the day every day, and sometimes I'll use that as my writer's prompt, and we'll do stuff with it. And every once in a while, you'll be sitting there, and somebody will be like, "Well, this word you used, what you can't be using it in that time period," and I'm like, "That comes from that time period." And people don't look at you like you're crazy. And I'm like, no, this word sounds modern, but it's been around for a long time. Or the word's changed definition 10 times, and now it means something totally different.
In those cases, my suggestion for people who are writing historical fiction, if you want to have a word like that where you think it's a little bit suspect or a little bit on the edge of something, or it's going to pull people out, I usually will have like a sentence of explanation that will follow that sometimes, just to sort of double down on like, no, really, folks. And then sometimes, you don't have to be absolutely militant about it. I'm using the word aspirin the year that aspirin was actually marketed. So it's a little bit, would it be in common vernacular just yet? Maybe not.
That's a good question.
Is it technically true? Yes. So I'm skating by on that. But the phrase aspirin sounds more period than I couldn't say Tylenol, even though that company was getting into, patents around that time period. But, so there's certain things that you can't, you just have to kind of say, all right, well, does it sound period enough? I also had a case where there's a medical term for my heroine in my young adult series. The book's called Darker Still, and the main character suffers from selective mutism, which is something that will happen sometimes to children, where after a childhood trauma, sometimes they will stop speaking. It's not that they cannot speak, it's just that they stop speaking. So it becomes almost a neurological disconnect. And so the term selective mutism was not in the common vernacular in 1880. However, I wanted to discuss the correct term because unfortunately other terms for her are in fact offensive words in our modern vocabulary. And I thought the phrase selective mutism actually sounds period enough. And I made the choice, and I fought with my editors about this because the copy editor was like, this wasn't in common usage. And I said, well, it is in this book because the alternative is a harmful derogatory word, and I'm not going to have it in the book. So these two words together sound absolutely like a historical phrase, and that's what we're going with. And it is, in fact, the much more accurate term. So in those cases, sometimes being anachronistic is better than using a word that's actually offensive.
Exactly. I completely agree. And then, again, I think people forget, and especially when it comes to something they're reading, and they get so wrapped up in the technicality of things that, dude, it's a fantasy piece written by a writer.
Yeah, you have spectral beings.
Exactly.
Right. That's the thing that
If the
going back to
problem you have is the
yeah,
vocabulary she's using and not the ghosts that are hanging out everywhere.
that's what that is, and thankfully, like that the people who piled on this person for giving me the 1 star for a word that was totally appropriate said, even if this wasn't like you're wrong, but even if you weren't wrong, and even if this was an incorrect word, she's dealing in a fantasy world that happens to be set in 1889, so the other fantasy elements here, that's also in play. So
Yeah.
again, sometimes you just can't win, and
No.
everybody's a critic. And so if you're going into the writing business, just be aware everybody's a critic, and somebody is always going to say something terrible about you and your work. It just happens all the time because there's so many different review platforms, and you just really have to have a thick skin about it. I don't like it, but you have to have a thick skin about it.
I completely agree, and I feel like one of the big things I learned on my journey to become a better writer is the concept of who are you writing for. If you're writing for you, which is what we're supposed to be doing, then it really doesn't matter. Of course, it's going to bother you, it's going to hurt, whatever. But if you're writing for you, then you know who you're writing for. You know who your audience is, and that's who we should be writing for, is ourselves. Of course, you might have to tweak something because of something else, but if your story is a certain way and you see it a certain way, then that's the way it should go.
Absolutely. And the concept, write what you know, absolutely, but also write what you want to know, write what you want to become obsessed by, and go and learn about it, and then write about it. So
Exactly.
I think that write what you know can also be, well, it should be a constantly ever expanding prompt.
I completely agree. I really do feel like, especially writers like to turn it into something else, especially when they're teaching new writers. Because if you teach that concept to a new writer, they're gonna get stuck on the fact of I can only write what I know, when it means so much more.
It happens in theater too, like the folks who are like really method actors who want to sort of go through all of these really, intense things, and often are really miserable to work with on set. That feel like they have to really, really be acting out as the character all the time. And it's like, can you just act though? Could you just act? How about try acting? So yeah, the folks that get real method about stuff, I think sometimes that can be a thing with writing too, is that sometimes it's okay, just write it, but do research and then write it.
Exactly. My little girl here is going to bed. She's showing off
All right.
her serving tray. Speaking of
Nice. That is a setup. That looks
yeah.
delicious. All right.
I also have this.
You don't want to fill the code.
Nice.
Download that game.
Okay.
All right.
All right, go to bed. Go ahead. All right, guys, we should be going to bed soon because I see that we are at the hour 15 mark, which is where we usually stop the show. But we've been having so much fun talking and, geeking out and talking writing, which is always a great experience, and I feel like these are the moments where novice writers or people who just want to learn how to become better writers get that nitty-gritty idea of, okay, so writing is a little more than what it is. It's a bigger grasp thing, and I know a lot of writers out there, they get lost in the books, because that's why I started the show, because I read all the how do you write books, and I sat there and go, there's something missing. There's a disconnect between the books and you starting to write, and that's why I started the show, was because I wanted people to find that disconnect together and become better writers. And I love the fact that you are spooktacular. And what is your final word?
My final word is the thing that you will. Is it one word or do I get a sentence?
Oh, you can say whatever you want.
Okay, my final set of words are, as a creative person, try to just lean into what is really inspiring you right now. And that's going to change maybe tomorrow. But like,
Yeah.
if you've got something that inspires you or interests you, lean into that, because creativity is built on interest and passion. And so don't judge what you're interested in, and don't let other people judge what it is. Lean into the stuff that you feel that you want to know more about, because that's going to be the thing that's going to unfold the next part of your creative process, is the thing that like you really want to know more about. Then go forth and learn about those things, and I guarantee you something creative is going to come from that. And that for me is what keeps me writing, and I think and it kind of what just keeps me going as a person.
I completely agree. And how do you know that you're not going to like something else until you go research it? That's the question, and that's what we're saying. When you write what you know, you're writing what you know because you know it, you love it, you're looking at it, you know exactly how this makes you feel, and this is making you want to write. Now, where can they find you? What are you up to? What's going on? Are you going to be at New York City Comic Con?
I am not going to be at New York City Comic Con because I am on a breakneck deadline. I have a book due next week, and I unfortunately am a little behind, and so I have to stay in and do my obligations and be a good writer, turning her book in on time. Kensington bumped up our turn-in schedule a little bit, so I mean it's a good thing because they really want to promote it, which that's
good.
that's
Yeah.
always a good thing. But it means that no fun for me in the Comic-Con regard. However, if anyone is going to be in the Fort Wayne, Indiana area, I will be at a convention called DeadCon, which is a huge horror and paranormal convention in Fort Wayne on the October 15th, that weekend. So I will be there talking about, I'll be doing an author panel there, as well as talking about the way that the 19th century view of ghosts informs how we talk about ghosts today. And I'll have a booth there. But yeah, so if you're looking for me online, myname.com, so leannareenahieber.com. And I'm active most on Twitter at Leanna Renee, so my first and my middle name. I'm also on Instagram with my full name. I have a Facebook, but I do not like Facebook, so I'm not on Facebook much at all. So you can like my author page, and I will do updates on my author page. But I do have on my website writers resources. I have, obviously we get asked a lot, hey, what do you have as advice for a beginning writer? And so I wrote it all down. Everything that was helpful to me when I was first starting out. And so it has links to things. I'm coming from a genre fiction angle. So if, I really am going to be more targeted towards genre writers in terms of what I say is helpful. So that's on my website under the free reads and extras page, or on my contact page. So yeah, I appreciate all the time you took today. Thank you for this in-depth discussion. It's been a real joy.
It was great to have you on. It was fun to hear all this stuff, and it was fun to get kind of spooky and down. And it's so funny how much your writing touches so much of what what I'm into. I love ghost hunting. I love ghosts. I love the Victorian times. I've never realized how much the Victorian times have influenced my writing now. Until I started looking at everybody like H.G. Wells and Dracula and Frankenstein, and I was like, wait a minute, all that stuff, that's all influencing my stuff now.
Yeah, well, and you mentioned Picture of Dorian Gray earlier. We were joking about your portrait back there. Yeah, no, it's a huge influence of mine. All of those paranormal classics, which were really touching on some very interesting social and societal stuff as well. I think in some ways that those are the forebearers of genre fiction in general. So it's no surprise that we're kind of building on those kind of foundations. So yeah, it's I love a good reference to some of those classics. You kind of can't go wrong with those. Little shout out to reanimate corpses.
Reanimate. Shadow, what do you gotta say, Mr. Reanimate Your Dolls?
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Well, that was another question I wanted to ask you guys, but as it's closing bell, maybe I'll save it for next time. But
Ooh.
I know I usually don't go about a sculpture with an idea ahead of time. If I'm making it for myself, I just pick up a piece of clay and something comes to life. And I was wondering how alive your characters are for you before you actually put them to paper.
That is a good question.
Oh, that's
Well,
such a
it
good
might be
question.
for another night. Sorry.
No, I just think they really are. I think that for me, coming from a theater background, I just really try to really think about my characters as I would play them on stage. So it's really investing a great deal of life into them. So the level of detail that you're putting into your work, I'm trying to think of every single character that I'm writing as how would I play this on stage.
Are they alive to you, your characters?
Oh yeah.
Or
Oh
are
yeah.
they,
They're
yeah.
very.
Like, do
They're
they talk to you and they're
very.
like, oh, I find out that you've got a name now, this.
Absolutely. Yeah, they talk a lot. They don't always reveal a lot of stuff right away. Sometimes I have to pull stuff out of them depending on the character. If it's a real forthcoming character, I'll know more than I want to know about them. But if it's a character who had a really bad experience in their youth, sometimes I won't know that until much, much later on, especially with these characters that I've had now I have some characters that are in 10 of my novels. And so I keep learning more about them as I go. I think that if you're sitting with a character in your head, like interview them, have an interview with them, ask them questions, and you will learn. A lot of writing is just having these ongoing people in your head talking, which it's a fine line between what we do and schizophrenia, but as long as the voices are controlled by you, then as long as you're able to rein them in,
Okay.
and that they don't cause too much damage, you're fine. You're fine.
Yeah,
Or
she
you
was
start a
like,
ghost hunting
controlled.
business.
I was like, controlled? Psh, nobody controlling anybody up there. Reined in?
Within
Yeah.
reason.
Control?
Within reason.
Well,
Oh
if they
my
start
God.
moving things, you've
Sometimes
got
it's
your own
like having
specters
Robin
right
Williams
there.
in your head playing 10,000 characters at the same time.
Well, and you, Louis, you have to get them out of your head and make them manifest, right? You have to get them out and into something tactile, right? Is that part of your process?
I'd say that's relatively good way to express it. Yeah, something like that. All of that energy is going to come out in some way, and luckily for me, it's in the clay. So
I have to
That's
say
it's
awesome.
though,
interesting to see what it forms into.
Yeah.
like watching you be creative, like watching you when you do the stuff that you start to get experimental with. Yeah, my mind is like, where'd you get this? Where are you going with this? How did you have that thought? Because that's that creative spark right there.
Right? Just like you guys, man, it's just something that's in there, and we're all just talking to our own ghosts somewheres.
Yeah, totally.
That's true.
Okay, before I know we have to go, but I have to ask this question though, Liz. When did the clay surprise you most about where it went?
Ooh.
Well, I mean, what I do the most is little miniatures.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, sure.
Let's see what I got. I've got some here. These aren't. Well, stuff like this, and these are pretty big for what I usually do. But this is just what makes sense to me. I mean, when I was a kid, I just in school have my desk covered in these things, and monsters and warriors, and pretty much anything, and you're just sitting there, fumbling through math class, and you've got a whole army in front of you.
Yeah.
So great. So, whatever we got to do, whatever we got to do to get through math class.
Right.
That's true.
The worst.
Oh my God, the stories that came out of math class.
Yeah, same.
You should see the math war when the numbers fought each other.
Yeah, the funny thing is, as an adult, math isn't that bad. I
No.
just it wasn't taught to me in a way that resonated.
Yeah, no, I still don't like it.
But that's kind of the whole point of everything, right? Is to understand yourself, right? Know thyself. It's a lifetime
Know thyself,
pursuit.
and this self does not do math.
Dude, I was supposed to be a mechanical engineer,
Calculator.
and that tells you something. I stepped away from the math. I was like, I am not a mechanical engineer. I may have the brain for a mechanical engineer, but I don't have the math for it.
Well, so you're engineering characters. I mean, there is something to be said for that. Like we
There you
are
go.
crafting, there is a you have to change the language a little bit, but I think the crafting and engineering, it's, we're creating worlds. We have to see things through that way.
I was gonna say what's funny is that I would create characters that create things like mechanical engineers do, and it's always funny to me. And I'm like, okay, I couldn't be in it, but the characters it.
Hey man, you're a wizard, Ralph.
You're a wizard, Ari. Leanne, I can tell that we want you back on. So, we're going to call you up. We'll probably have you like a guest host or something on the side. I love the way you talk.
Yeah,
Thank
you.
you. Well, this has been a joy. And so, keep in touch anytime. The whole fam.
Exactly. Oh, and it's so funny that the whole reason we all knowing you is because you and Cadma met on set.
We did. We met on set. It was one of my favorite days on set because we just talked forever about story and about writing and all kinds of things. And
stuff,
so,
yeah.
Oh my gosh, no! When we ran back into each other, it was just like it was such a cosmic, awesome moment. So I'm very thankful to her and to all of you guys because you're awesome.
We love you, and that's why we had you on. And especially during this time of year, we were constantly thinking about you because we were thinking about you last year. I was like, we need to interview you. How are we going to do it? And now that the pandemic has hit and we can do live, it's made it much easier. All right, with that.
Yeah, no.
With that, because we're going to keep talking because I'm enjoying the conversation.
I know. So no, let's I appreciate everyone's time here and thank you for all that. And we'll do this again.
Looking forward to it. It's a pleasure getting to hang out with you a bit.
You too. And all of your amazing creatures.
Night.
She's telling me exciting secrets over here. Great. All right, guys, let's do what we do. I am going to press the button, see what happens. Talk while it goes on. Who knows when